This presentation will include audio descriptions for the visually impaired. Hashtag the Bounce Back RDU, a virtual storytelling event produced by Alexus Rhone of Truth Meets Story in partnership with Seek Raleigh, a program of Raleigh Arts. For Black women as well as Black men, it is axiomatic that if we do not define ourselves for ourselves, we will be defined by others for their use and to our detriment. Audre Lorde. Alexus Rhone, an African-American woman and founder of Truth Meets Story LLC, will tell a story titled A People Without a Formative Narrative. Alexus has curly hair and is standing in front of a brick building. We were all excited. Our seminary had just hired the foremost authority on the ethics and theology of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was a Korean man, Dr. Hak Jun Lee. And we were excited, but we were also a little curious about how a son of Korea had come to have such love and affection for a son of our community. Dr. Lee hit that campus and he did not disappoint. But on the first day of class, I got my face cracked, but I also got my life fixed. He was going over the syllabus, discussing our reading assignments, integration papers, presentations, final analysis, comprehensive analysis. And I noticed what I perceived to be a gaping omission in the course content. And so I raised my hand and I said, "Excuse me, Dr. Lee, are we also going to discuss the improprieties of Dr. King? I mean, after all, this is an ethics class and his improprieties are part of public record." And Dr. Lee, for his part, was super gracious, and he said something like, you know, there are a lot of layers to Dr. King, and we're going to be digging into, to as many as we can. And so I thought it was an interesting answer, but it was not the one that I was looking for. I mean, I was expecting a rousing, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, we're going to get into all of that. I mean, I had been a part of these dominant culture institutions for many years. And, whenever we discussed anything about Dr. King, somehow his improprieties had always found a way into the conversation. And so Dr. Lee, in my immediate sort of assessment, was in violation of what had been the standard. And then he did a lecture that would set the tone for how we would evaluate the content for the entire quarter. The lecture was called The Art of Traditioning. And Dr. Lee said, in order for a tradition to take hold, there are 5 things that must be in place. A formative narrative, a way to celebrate that narrative, a celebration of that narrative, governing laws and values, a way to disseminate the information concerning the governing laws and values of that people, and a way to practice said governing laws and values of the people. And he says, so for example, let's take our Jewish brothers and sisters. What is their formative narrative? Whole class yells out, Exodus story. It's like, good. He says, what is the celebration of that formative narrative? The Passover. And he says, what are the governing laws and values of our Jewish brothers and sisters? And we yell out, the Torah, the Pentateuch, the Ten Commandments. And he says, all right. He says, how do they disseminate that information? And we said, Jewish schools. And then he asked, how do they practice their governing laws and values? And we said, they live in community. They support each other. And he's like, great. He's like, now let's take Americans. What is the formative narrative for Americans? And we yell out, independence from Britain. He's like, good. What is the celebration of that formative narrative? Independence Day, 4th of July. Then he says, what are the governing laws and values for Americans? And we yell out, Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And he says, how do we disseminate information concerning our governing laws and values? Like public school systems. And then he says, how do we practice our governing laws and values? And the conversation got a little wonky at that point. So we were saying things like, we elect servant leaders to represent us, and started talking about sort of the structure of the government. But we all chuckled at how, none of our responses to that question were as forceful as the previous assessments. And then he asked, and then he said, okay, now let's discuss African Americans. And he asked, what is the formative narrative for African Americans? And we all got quiet. One person said, is it the civil rights movement? Another person said it's the transatlantic slave trade. And a third person said, well, it's our West African ancestral roots. But no one could say for sure, and so we sat quietly. And then Dr. Lee said, if you don't know your formative narrative, you will adopt someone else's story where the heroes look like them and the villains look like you. Oh, I was gut punched at that moment because, see, it never occurred to me to question whether or not we were going to discuss the improprieties of white theologians before discussing their ethics. And up until that moment, it was odd how I never stopped to wonder, how is it that my government was able to get so close to Dr. King to record his improprieties and to make them a part of a public record and still couldn't protect his life? My face was cracked. I was laid bare. But my life was also fixed because now I had a clue about what had been missing this entire time. It was the absence of a formative narrative. But I was also extremely hopeful because there are scholars like Dr. Wade Nobles, the foremost scholar on the psyche of people of African descent, who was doing a lot of work to create that formative narrative. And Dr. Ralph Batsui Watkins, my former professor in Atlanta, who is also doing some really pivotal work concerning the formative narrative of African Americans, and he's actually recruiting young scholars to help be a part of that work. But today, when you ask what is the formative narrative of African Americans, the answer with the most integrity is I don't know. But our community is filled with stories of resilience. There's a gospel song that Aretha Franklin sang, how I got over. My soul looks back and wonders how I got over. Yeah, co-sign Aretha. A lot of folks look at our lives and they read our stories in the history annals of this country and they wonder, how on earth have this people, with everything that they have suffered, been able to survive and dare thrive, a lot of them? Well, I believe the answer to that question is found in the stories that you are about to hear. Stories of resilience, stories of hope as a part of the universal, the hope chest for all of humanity. Stories of the universal experience of resilience, particularized within the African American context. African Americans sharing stories about a time that they fell down, they didn't stay down, they bounced back. Presenting hashtag the Bounce Back RDU. Enjoy. In order to be whole, we must recognize the despair oppression plants within each of us. That thin, persistent voice that says our efforts are useless, it will never change, so why bother? Accept it. Audre Lorde. Ruby A. Jackson, an African American woman and a sports and STEM advocate, will tell a story titled Playing Small, an African American woman in corporate America. She has long brown dreadlocks and is wearing a pink jacket over a white shirt, standing in front of the Dorian Lind No Damsel mural, where Pocahontas is spray painting the wall in red with the message, "Remember the truth."
A slew of emails came through on my computer screen, and I sat there wondering, how in the world did all these women know that I didn't apply for that management position? A few hours before, it was just announced that Jason would move from his current department to become the manager of the department that I worked for 7 years. I had some questions for HR. When they finally replied, they told me, "Ruby, we promise you, we didn't tell them that you didn't apply for that position. We simply told people that no woman applied for the position." There was one email in my inbox that I knew that I couldn't ignore. It was from Jessica. She and I have a really cool relationship, even to today. She's a white woman in her 50s, old enough to be my mother. And even though I'm often the leader and the manager in our relationship, she's the one who's encouraging me, just like she did in her email, where she asks, "Why didn't I apply for the position?" I felt her scolding me and encouraging me at the same time. And what I replied to her at that time, she would later tell me she knew was BS. I gave her different reasons, like I had just taken in my teenage nephew and I needed to focus on his future and not mine. And that I was having fun where I was. That part was honest, but I really did want that position. So why didn't I apply? I've been with the company for 7 years, and I've been part of some of the biggest wins and biggest losses. One of my favorite times at the organization was actually when Reagan and I worked on building a struggling department that everyone had written off and given up on. For 2 years, we grew the business to about $1 million in revenue. And then randomly, it was given to Jason. I didn't really care much. I was on a different project, being challenged, and that's one thing that I love about science and engineering, is that those projects are always challenging. And I welcome the challenges. So when it was given to Jason, I was a little hurt and a little upset that that group was like our baby. No one cared about it, but I moved on. So when this management position had come up, I for sure had planned to apply for it. Our company was going through so much change at the time. We had sold the business, bought another business, and I knew people on both sides of the aisle. Not only did I know the people, I knew the ins and outs of our group, our strengths, our weaknesses. I was for sure ready this time. I applied for 3 or 4 management positions before then, and I had been given so many different reasons on why I wasn't ready. And even though some of those I didn't agree with, I knew that this time I was absolutely ready. There was nothing standing in my way. So I planned to apply up until one day where I was sitting in a board meeting, planning for the team like we always did. And I learned that the group that Reagan and I built was actually coming back to our department. Now, and I started to put 2 and 2 together in my head. This group is with Jason, who's currently a manager. My group currently has a management position open. What's going to happen with Jason if this group comes back? Management told me everything I needed to know, and I decided not to apply. I never told anyone that story until one day I was sitting in that same boardroom. This time, me, Jessica, Jason, and a few other leaders. And we were there because Jessica had called us there. She was upset. She was irate, livid. You could clearly tell because when she gets mad, her whole face starts to turn red, and she doesn't hide her emotions well. She had no reason to apologize for hiding them at that time. We had been encouraging Jessica for the past year to become an administrator of a software program. She had been requesting from us training to do her job effectively, to grow to the administrative level. And in that meeting, it was announced that 3 young men would be receiving training on the very same software that we were asking Jessica to become an expert on. She was livid. And she let us know that. What none of us expected. She pulled a feminist card and wondered if the only reason why she wasn't selected was she was a woman. After all, she had some really good valid points. One of the men was already an expert in the software, so why was he being trained? And 2 other ones weren't even working in the software as much as she was. So why weren't we sending her to training? I think we were all blindsided by her pulling the feminist card and even just knowing how important her advancement was to her. I sat a few days later feeling a little ashamed, but also empowered and encouraged. One, I was ashamed that I didn't stand up more being Jessica's manager and fight for her. I was actually silent in the entire meeting. 2, she encouraged me and inspired me because I thought that I was the one that always felt like I was being locked out. And I honestly thought I was the only one sharing this experience, being a woman, being a Black woman. But that day, Jessica opened my eyes and made me realize that it was more than just about me. So I sat down with her and I shared my story. And I told her the real reason that I didn't apply for that management position. We laughed and she said she knew that I'd given her a BS answer at the time. Shortly after, another opportunity to work with another organization came for me. And I sat and I considered it. But this new position checked a lot of boxes for me. It was closer to home, a little less responsibility and more money, and very, very close to my community. I mean, I could walk to church and join noonday prayer, and that was important for me. So I sat over the weekend considering an opportunity. After all, I had just applied actually for my 5th position at this organization because another management position came up. So I knew that when I went in to give my resignation, that I could demand for almost anything I wanted because I knew my value, even though I didn't always stand up for myself. But after looking through my emails once again, I saw a slew of emails over the past 4 years where I've been requesting women's leadership initiatives to be put in place so that we could promote a female leader to the business. All of them went on deaf ears. So I decided to part ways with the organization. Monday afternoon, I walked into the office, talked with Jason and a few other managers there, and let them know that I was leaving. They tried to convince me to stay. And I let them know that it wasn't any more about money. It wasn't any more about rising to a management position there. But it was about values, about feeling like there was a place that I could feel wanted and included. We didn't agree or see eye to eye on everything, and I felt that some listened more than others. But what I was most excited about and most proud of, that as I left that meeting, they shared with me that for the first time, we would be promoting a woman to the senior leadership team. And I thought, finally, we have a voice and a seat at the table.
We do not have to romanticize our past in order to be aware of how it seeds our present. Audre Lorde. Star Robinson, an African American woman and CEO of True Star Power is Knowledge, LLC, will tell a story titled 3 Times I Considered Suicide. She has long dark braids and is wearing a black t-shirt with beige lettering that reads, lightly melanated, hella black. She's standing in front of a rust brown gate.
There are 3 times in my life that I considered taking my life. The first time, I was 12 years old. In 7th grade, I had decided to change my math grade from an F to a B. In 7th grade, got an F, didn't know what I was going to do, and then I remembered my cousin had told me about this trick where he had changed his F to a B. We got carbon report cards back then. So just with a pencil, he told me, get a pencil star, write it in light, and then take the carbon paper and rub it over it, and you're good to go. Perfect. So I changed my grade. I present this beautiful report card and this beautiful B in math to my mother, who knows, like I know, that math has never been my favorite subject, or one that I was all that good at. So she's elated. She's praising me. Good job, baby. I can't believe it. I can't either. All right, but I've done it. Presented it to her. Here we are. Then my conscience kind of got the best of me. And the next day I'm standing in the mirror in our bathroom and I'm crying my eyes out. And I'm thinking, what kind of daughter are you, Star, that you would deceive your mother and lie like this? The second time I considered taking my life, I was 28 years old. I had just had my second child. Now, my first child, my doctors talked to me about postpartum. They didn't quite go that way the first time, but the second time, I've got 2 babies now, 2, a year and a half apart, in diapers, 2 diaper bags, double stroller, 2 car seats. I am out of my mind, out of my mind. I didn't know what exactly was wrong with me. I couldn't articulate that. I just knew that something was wrong. And again, my doctors had talked to me about postpartum depression both times. And I, kind of looked at them and I remember thinking, now, I'm black, right? Those are not problems that anybody that I know that's in my family and that has prepared me with all this beautiful advice for motherhood has talked to me about postpartum depression. But I'm driving one day. I'm in my truck, I'm on the freeway, and I've got to get off on this exit. And it veers off kind of to the right. But right directly in front of me is a brick building, a big brick building. I'm going about 60 miles per hour even as I get ready to veer off. And all I'm thinking about is, I'm doing it. I'm driving into that wall. Right now, I'm driving into that wall. With everything in me, I thought that's what I was about to do. And then something in me made me look up in my rearview mirror, and I looked up in my rearview mirror. And my babies was in the back seat. I said, damn. I see, I can't even kill myself because of y'all. Love has saved me. The third time, I decided to take my life. 10 years later, I'm 38. going through one of the most difficult times in my life. Divorce after 13 years and 3 babies. A custody battle. My kids, custody battle, yes. Relocated back home to Anderson, Indiana. I hadn't been there since I was 18 years old. I left at 18 and I never returned. Now I'm back home. While I'm there, I get diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So all this is going on at the same time. Divorce, custody battle, relocated because I didn't have a job or a place to live. I gotta go to my mom's house. Now I'm there and find out I have stage 3 breast cancer. Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Well, spring comes. So here it is again, spring, y'all. Something about spring. Spring comes. And I've persevered, right? At the end of cancer, I've made it. I've had the double mastectomy, the reconstruction, right? I'm on my way to trial to get my babies, and I'm for sure going to get them. So I'm gonna beat cancer. Divorce is about to be over. I'm actually in LA, getting ready to do my thing, doing this a storytelling event. And I'm in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, and I'm staying in this beautiful home up in the mountains. We had to drive up to the mountain, literally. You know, we're there some days, some nights. Every night so far that I'm there, I'm going out on this balcony. There's these double doors in the room I'm in. I can go right out to the balcony. I'm looking. There's the lake, there's the stars. I am reflecting. It's great. So one night, I woke up, looked up, and never before had the commitment to end my life being so strong and so real as it was that night. So I swaddled myself in the covers, got in real tight, because I just knew, you know, that if I stood up, that I was going to walk onto that balcony and jump off. Everything in me said, jump off that balcony, Star. So I unswaddled myself, rolled out of bed to the floor, boom, crawl the little 3 feet to the restroom, grab my phone, because I know that I am going to need an intervention. I'm going to need an intervention. Grab my phone, lock myself in the restroom, and I'm crying, and I'm thinking, who am I going to call? Who am I going to call? Who am I going to call? I thought about my friend Jenny, because she was overseas. I want to say in Dubai, and it was a 12-hour difference, so I knew she'd be up. I text her on WhatsApp. I said, I need you right now. What are you doing? I need you right now. She called me immediately. Called me from Dubai. Called me. What's going on, Star? And I'm telling her, Jenny, this is it. I don't want to do it. I'm tired. I am tired. I am tired of being tired. And she said to me, Star, you are at the beginning of the most beautiful part of your life. Look at where you've come from, what you have persevered through. You're almost there. You can't do this. So I heard, I'm listening to her, I'm still crying. Oh my God, I don't know. And then she said something to me that was both simple, both funny and profound. She said, quit being a punk. And get your ass up off that floor. Quit being a punk. Get your punk ass up. And I said, who you calling a punk? And that done it. And that was enough. It snapped me right out of it. Just enough that I was able to get up. Now, I ain't go nowhere near that balcony the rest of the time I was there. To walk into the room I was in, you had to walk past the balcony. When I walked in the room, I was on the door, on the walls, trying to stay away from that balcony. So I finally, my last night, I said, you know what, Star, I'm going. right? Well, I didn't go that night. It was nighttime. I was too afraid. So I waited until the morning and went that day. In the daytime, I decided, okay, I walk in there. I'm at the balcony. I'm at the sliding doors. Whew, you're going to go out there. So I open them. I step out. Like, okay, you out here, that's good. I sit down, that's good. Then I said, no, Star, you got to go to the edge. You got to go to the edge. Go to the edge. So I walk to the edge. Whoo, and I'm nervous. I'm looking out and there's the lake and the trees. And whoo. So I go ahead and I get to the edge and I look down. And I said, what? Oh shit, I be damn. It ain't but 2 stories down. 2 stories down. I couldn't believe it. Now, had I jumped, I would have had to I'd explain why I'm in the ER, not ICU. Why my dumb ass then jumped off a 2-story balcony. Right? I was so tickled, and I just thought, God knew. God knew, because I was committed to this. And God knew. If she jumped, she only gonna be injured. And so I'm just so grateful, but I was so tickled, and I still am, at the 2 stories. Because had I jumped, I would have landed on ground. I'd have been injured, maybe a broke ankle, hurt myself, some bruises. But I would have had to be Superman to actually kill myself. I would have had to fly through bushes and trees to get to where I had a drop off to actually kill myself. And again, love saved me. Love saved me. And it was just imperative to me to be able to share this story, because the love that saved me is the love that's still saving me. And I love my strong, beautiful Black women, all of the women that helped me get exactly where I am.
It's easier to control a victim than a healed, evolved person. Gabrielle Union. Marsha Maddox, an African-American woman and artist owner of Maddox Life Consulting, will tell a story titled, How to Fix a Broken Heart. She is surrounded by tall trees on a nature trail. She is wearing a pink and green head wrap and a green blouse.
November 1989, my 4th semester at Howard University. I was living my best life. Me and my 2 best girlfriends, we all hated living at home, and we loved dancing. Now, I didn't like living at home. My father died when I was 3, and for me, love left the house. So being at Howard and away from home, I was never going back. I got a call. The dean summoned me to his office. It was my mom. Aunt Ruby was not doing well. The whole family was going to Savannah. When we got down to Georgia, there were a lot of people in the house over the course of the next few days, going in and out of Aunt Ruby's bedroom and her personal things and rifling through her treasures and trinkets and marveling over things. And I took notice that this was upsetting my mom, because she had gone down to Savannah to take care of Aunt Ruby 2 months out of every year of my life. And for her to be down there and these people thinking about what they can get, and she's sitting there praying for Aunt Ruby, it broke her heart. In fact, I think that's the reason she got sick, because she ended up in the ICU. I don't even remember going to Aunt Ruby's funeral. My mom had to stay a month in the hospital, and I stayed every night with her. So this was the beginning of a long journey. We had to stay in Savannah another month until she was able to travel. But once she was, we were able to go back to New York. But before then, I had to go pack up all my stuff at Howard, say bye to my girlfriends, pack up 10 suitcases, a trunk, and my sewing machine. Being at home with Mom was not going to be an easy journey. But when we got there, we went back and forth to the doctor. And I remember one day, one of the doctors said to me, "I want to examine you. You don't look good." So he checked my heart, and he thought it was an irregular heartbeat and sent me to the cardiologist. They did an ultrasound, and he showed me on the ultrasound screen, but he showed me with his hands as well, and that was so memorable to me. He said, "Your valve is moving like this. Well, it should move like this, but yours is moving like that." And it was so clear that it was a broken heart, literally. I never got sick. So over the next few days, I remembered praying over my body. We did some exercises at the YMCA when I was a kid. And we would look at our aura and pray over our body. And during this time, a voice said to me, "Don't begrudge your mother even a glass of water." And that struck me as an opportunity to make up for being a rotten teenager. I mean, I wasn't that bad. I was a 5%er. I was an earth. But I would always tell my mom what to do. I was so sassy, telling her she can't eat pork and what she should cook and what she should do. And here we are at home, and now we have the same diet. Neither one of us ate pork, and she had to cut down on her salt. So that was the beginning of that long journey. But when I went back to the doctor, he showed me that the ultrasound showed my valve was working perfectly. And I said, wow, just loving on my mom and rubbing on her feet and not begrudging her even a glass of water actually proved that your thoughts and your actions do affect your health. So over the next 3 years, my mom did transition, but I make sure that my friends repair their relationships with their parents, and I encourage them to not let their parent leave this place with a broken relationship, because you will be the one with a broken heart. So don't begrudge your parent even a glass of water.
You can't put the past behind you. It's buried in you. Claudia Rankine. Ade, an African-American woman and owner of Dunu Cuisine, will tell a story titled From West Africa to East Coast America, an adoption narrative. She is wearing a yellow dress with a white and yellow head wrap. She is seated on a pier with water and trees in the background.
This is Benin in West Africa, and I am 10 years old. I always had 3 meals a day with my family at our dining room table. My mother would wake me up in the morning, have a spread for breakfast, and send me off to school. I'd come back at lunchtime and have lunch with my family yet again. I would go back to school, walk back home, have dinner at the table with my family again. And so it's something that I've always cherished. And on this particular day, I started my day the same way, except this time I had finals. And my father, who was such a militant man, really made sure that we took school very seriously. And so you can imagine my excitement on my walk back home to let him know that I've passed. So I take my regular route. I walk through the marketplace. I see all my aunties with their spread of goods that I'm sure they had spent all morning making. It was such a beautiful day. This sun was shining and, kissed us all so gently. And I got lost in it. And before I knew it, I was home. And so I'm now in front of our black gate. I open it, I walk onto the cement floor, and to my left is a mango tree. And, you know, this tree gifted us every year just the gift of the sweetest mangoes. I still remember the taste. And so now I'm walking up the terrace, and our living room doors are open, and I see my mother directly across from me. She's on our yellow rotary phone. I still remember the phone number. You know, it's that thing that you got to move like this. 22 47 63. I have to say it in French because that's how I remember it. And so we locked eyes for just a moment, and I couldn't help but feel that that conversation was about me. So she quickly just turned away from me, and I went on about my business. And at the dinner table, a place I loved so much and spent so much time, my mother then tells me I was to be adopted and I would be going to America. So about a month or two later, I find myself on a plane. So here I am on this adventure, looking out the window, in awe of the clouds, how they just glide. I mean, I'd never been on a plane before, so this was quite the experience for me. I've always heard of this wonder that is America, and I get to experience that now. And so after what felt like forever of a flight, finally land and come out the airport and get into the car. And we're now driving from New York to Connecticut. And I'm again looking out the window and seeing what's all around me. It was so different. It's so different, not like what I remember from Africa. And, you know, I see the tall trees and the sun rays kind of trying to peek through them leaves a little bit, but it still wasn't the same. And so as we take that left onto Lakewood Drive, I see what is now to be my new home, and I take a deep breath and I'm like, Ade, you made it. You're here. And so days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, and I am now starting school. And my first day of school, I walk into Mrs. Ferrari's 5th grade classroom. I'm wearing a white t-shirt and purple overalls, and my hair was in Senegalese twists down to my back. And I'm looking like, wow, these people do not look like me. And I'm scared. I don't speak the language. How am I even supposed to get an education? I didn't even know where to start or what to even think. And so that same day, though, I met my angel from above, I like to call her, Mrs. Tui, who was my ESL teacher. And that just means she is the English as a second language teacher. And that started a beautiful relationship for me. I'm always amazed by her and by any teacher, and specifically one who is an ESL teacher, because you are in a room full of children from all different countries that speak all different languages, and here you are, you only speak English. And how do you communicate with these children? How do you even begin to teach them this new language and this new culture that they're now a part of? And I remember when I walked in, she was telling me to sit down. I mean, I only knew how to say I love you, so I didn't know what she meant. She kept looking at me and I was looking at her. I'm like, finally, she's like this, sit down. And I sit, and somehow she managed to teach me how to speak English. And I loved being there with her. She was so gentle and she was so patient and kind. And I never wanted to leave, actually. I dreaded going home. You know, most of my childhood, I felt like my heart was beating through the soles of my feet.
it wasn't the same. It was incredibly lonely. That vivid memory I have of eating in a communal style with my family 3 times a day in Benin was not what I was met with here. It was, hey, you eat cereal in the morning, make sure you catch that bus, eat whatever they give you as an option in the cafeteria. And then when you get home and your homework was done, then you can eat in the breakfast room table whatever was made. And so I felt like so much was taken away from me. I didn't have that same joy I had as a little girl at home. And I spent a lot of my time wondering why it was that my parents would send me here. I wondered so much what that decision was. And so at 17 years old, I graduated and I left to go find myself, as some may say. And I start working at this hotel called The Study, which is a hotel in New Haven, Connecticut. And so this hotel had a restaurant called Heirloom. This restaurant served farm-to-table food. That meant that you ate well. That meant that food was fresh and good for you. And I was introduced to a new concept then. You know, my perception of food started to change. I was like, well, wow, food is more than this thing that you eat. It's more than an edible. It became for me an evolving yet traditional canvas that you can use to share your history with the world. And through that came the logic of me using food to share that story of that young girl who, through no choice of her own, left her home at 10 years of age, grew in a foreign place, but never forgot where she came from, endured so much, but never wavered. And so I have made it my mission to bring all those experiences together and serve it to you on a plate.
We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Pastor Robert Parrish, an African American man and board member for Arts Access, will tell a story titled Mama Knows Best, Even When It Hurts. He is wearing a light blue button-down shirt and is seated on the edge of a dry fountain on the campus of the Governor Moorhead School for the Blind.
I was born in the year 1959 in Bryson City, North Carolina. I was born with congenital glaucoma and other eye conditions. In fact, I was totally blind. Well, there was one day when I was looking at a light, and one of my relatives said to my mother, "Hey, Peggy, that boy can see." So realizing that I could actually see light, at least an image, they rushed me to a doctor who opened up my pupil. This is the reason why I have sight today. Well, I lived life as normal in Bryson City. I played with the kids, relatives, and went to church and went to picnics and so forth. I remember my first birthday party. I was fascinated with colored ice cubes for some reason. And my mother served me ice cubes that were green. I was thrilled. Well, soon after that party, I must have been around 5. things changed drastically. I remember a long car ride from Bryson City to Raleigh, where I entered the Governor Moorhead School for the Blind. This was in 1965. Back then, the Governor Moorhead School for the Blind was segregated. I was entered into the black campus, where we got meat maybe once a week, whereas the white school got meat much more often. Well, I remember sitting on some steps in front of the cottage that I was to sleep in, that my mother and I were talking, maybe with some other people, but all of a sudden, Mama wasn't there. Well, I just got up, and rambunctiously ran out and found some other kids to play with, got into a fight with maybe a bully, perhaps he was a bully, named Johnny. Johnny must have been about 8. Well, after that fight, we made up and, resumed as just being normal kids. And, but where was Mama? And I was soon pulled aside by Miss Etheridge, and she said, "Your mother's gone. We're here with you now." I was devastated. I remember deep inside that I must have cried for months on end. But Miss Etheridge said to me that I'm going to be with you, nurture you. You're going to be properly trained to dress yourself and learn to eat and do those things that normal people do. Well, true to her word, she and other house parents did nurture me and made sure I got to meals on time and to class on time. I remember another house parent named Miss Miller who taught me how to tie my shoes. She took this wooden shoe and taught me how to lace and tie a bow. Miss Etheridge, along with other house parents, also took me home on occasion. You see, I couldn't go home to Bryson City like other kids got to go to their homes every weekend, because Bryson City was over 300 miles away. And so on holidays like Easter, Miss Etheridge took me to her home, where I remember watching my first football game. And that was very special to me. And I think I've liked football ever since. Well, in kindergarten, I learned to play with blocks, learned my letters, maybe learned some Braille letters back then as well in kindergarten. I eventually learned how to read Braille, and I became an avid reader of the Bible. Well, as I grew into the surroundings of the school, and as the school became more family to me, I excelled. I made good grades. I did well extracurricularly as well. Ran track and field, for instance. And man, did we have a track team and a half. We won several tournaments of the blind. You see, back in that day, there was blind schools in every state. Well, we were a part of the Eastern Association, Eastern Athletic Association of the Blind. And we won 4 or 5 championships. And I've got the gold medals to prove it. There was another time pivotal to my school career here at Governor Moorhead that I met a guy named Ronald. Now, Ronald was the local preacher, if you will. He was well respected, to the point that one Easter, the cafeteria workers who could not go to their own worship service asked if Ronald would go in the kitchen and preach to them. Well, Ronald asked me to come along with him. Remember, I was an avid Bible reader. And Ronald preached one of the best sermons I ever heard, and the people were moved. But Ronald soon left the school, and people were wondering, well, who's going to take Ronald's place? Well, you know what the saying is, never send for whom the bell tolls. So me and this guy named Sam became instrumental in providing ministry for the school. We gave devotionals. We started Bible studies throughout the campus. We even played a bingo game called Faith, which taught people Bible trivia. It was like a simulated bingo game. Well, upon graduating from the Government of Morehead School, I entered Appalachian State Go Mountaineers and got an undergraduate degree in speech communications and a minor in psychology, and went on to seminary where I got my MDiv, got it at Southeastern Seminary in Wake Forest. And from there, I entered clinical pastoral education. I trained at the University of North Carolina for my first year of residency. In my second year of residency, I trained at a hospital in Texas. Well, during that residency training as a chaplain, I did what was required. I took, I was required to do therapy. And one of my therapists said to me, Robert, I see that you're wondering about your mother not saying goodbye. Why don't you ask her about it? And so one day in Bryson City, I did. And my mother told me, she says, yes, I did say goodbye to you, but because we were urged not to linger, I had to leave quickly. It made sense to me. And that was a very cathartic moment. Upon completion of my training as a chaplain, I did look for jobs in hospitals, but, they were beginning not to hire chaplains as they could just use residents. So I looked for jobs at the Government of Morehead School, and I got a job to be a house parent, and I eventually became a teacher's aide, and I eventually became certified to teach blind students special ed, and I taught it for several years. But I go back to being a house parent, where I took in 6-year-old kids. I took in kids like Daniel, and Daniel was bewildered and wondered, what's going on? Hey, where's my mother or father? I feel lost. I feel hurt, abandoned. But I took Daniel aside and I says, Daniel, I am here. I will be your parent away from home. No, I can't replace your mother or father, but I will be your support away from home. We're going to nurture you, love you as our own. You're going to learn how to dress yourself. You're going to learn how to eat, wash clothes. You're going to be the best person you can be. Now, while people call my mother a bad mom for placing me in a school for the blind, I think that's the best thing that could have ever happened to me. And my students are living proof as they're now contributing to society.
When things people have said stuck like glue. Pastor Lisa Yaboa. Ian Parks, an African-American man and president of the nonprofit organization Teens Have a Voice Too, will tell a story titled The Day My Dream Was Crushed. He is seated on top of a table in the park wearing a black baseball cap, a black t-shirt, and white shorts with dark sunshades.
Have you ever had your dreams crushed before? See, I grew up as a military kid because I was born to a father who was in the Army. Never knowing what stability felt like because we always went from place to place and state to state. But by the age of 8, I made a discovery. One of the things that I discovered was my first love. And the type of love that I had for this game was the same type of love that you have for your favorite meal. The game that I'm talking about that I love was basketball, and playing it just brought me the most joy that I ever had in my life. still moving from place to place and state to state, I now had a little bit of stability. Because of my love for this game, I was able to take it with me. But then I had a day of reckoning come. My dad was getting ready to retire from the military, and we were getting ready to move to North Carolina. Not knowing what to expect from North Carolina, I just knew I was going to be able to take basketball with me. And the day comes, and I'm here, arrive, waiting for this new experience to happen. One of the things that I discovered upon my arrival to North Carolina was the love that other people had for the same game that I had. But their love was on a different level. Their love was damn near insane, and I could not relate at first. By this time, I'm in 8th grade when we moved to North Carolina. And in 9th grade, I decided I want to take my relationship with basketball a step further. See, I was a above average height, skinny kid, but I was very competitive on the court. Why I wanted to take my passion of basketball to the next level was because I wanted to match that same intensity that other people have for this game. So I try out when I'm in high school, and the first cuts, it was a little bit overwhelming, but I made it. One of the big things that I noticed was the amount of people that was at the basketball court at the same time. Not knowing how to deal with that at first, I came out a little nervous, but I made it through. Then upon the second cuts, we're doing more drills, being a little bit more precise. We're doing passing drills, we're doing shooting drills, doing layup drills and defensive drills. But I also make it past the second cuts as well. Now after the second cuts, the crowd gets a little bit smaller. We're still doing the same drills, but we have to be a little bit more precise and we have to pay a little bit more attention to detail. Now, after this last cuts, I didn't make the team. Though I was disappointed, I did realize that I had more opportunities to go. Because this was my first time trying out. I'm just a freshman, but high school lasts for 4 years. Then next year comes around. I try out again. But guess what? I make it past the first cuts. I make it past the second cuts. But I have the same result as the first year. Then one day I'm sitting at the dinner table, and as I'm thinking out loud, I say to myself, I can't wait to play in the NBA one day. As I make that statement is followed by a comment from my mom saying, how you gonna make it to the NBA if you can't even make a basketball team? After that comment follows laughter, and then my brother decides to chime in and say, dude, it's never gonna happen. You might as well kill that dream. And then more laughter comes after that. See, I never knew how deep that pain would hit me that day, but I do know that pain was also met with anger. And then next year comes around, I decide to try out again. But the only thing about this time around was I end up with the same result, but I actually throw in the towel this time. And the reason why I throw in the towel this time around is because I'm still hearing that laughter in the background. The laughter that I have in the background is my mom laughing, my dad laughing, my brother laughing, and I still hear those same words. You're never gonna make the basketball team. So fast forward, I get out to high school and I enlist in the military. When I enroll in the military, it's a new experience for me, but one of the things that I loved doing was volunteering. And upon volunteerism that I did in the military, I did a lot of things involving the youth. One thing that I learned about my volunteer work that I did was I actually had a passion for the youth. But at the same time, I discovered another passion. I also got another opportunity to try out for the basketball team. See, the base that I was stationed at was having trials for a basketball team, and I decided to give it another run. But the only difference this time is I actually make the team. And now I'm actually living part of the dream that I thought I would have. But this is a whole nother journey because now I'm practicing. We're doing a whole bunch of conditioning work. I'm lifting weights. I'm focused on my nutrition. And this is all before our season even starts. And then our season comes around, and the first game we played this Division III college. And one of my biggest takeaways from that game was, wow, I can actually hang with those guys. I ended up scoring around 6 or 7 points during this game. But another huge takeaway was I might not have been able to play in college. In the pros, but I know for damn sure I could play in college. Another huge takeaway was looking at my work ethic. And the work ethic that I had was the one thing that I know I didn't do while I was in high school. See, one thing I realized in life was if you really want something, you really got to work at it and make it happen. Because sometimes, regardless of what people tell you, it still starts and ends with you. So although I didn't make it to the NBA, I did discover that I had another passion. And the other passion that I have is I love the youth. I love working with the youth. And I have now started a nonprofit organization that's focused on helping the youth. But one thing that I still keep in the back of my mind is not letting the dreams of that youth get crushed like the dreams that I had get crushed.
Being around Black people is like watching a foreign film without translation. Claudia Rankin. Ghazi Muhammad, an African-American man, an empowerment coach and founder of Felon 2.0, will tell a story titled The Bounce Back. He is wearing a red sweatshirt with a black baseball cap with red lettering. He is walking as he shares his story.
So, years ago, when I came home from prison, it was rough. I came out, trying to get a job, and it was kind of rough because no one want to hire you when you have a lot of felonies. And I didn't have a lot of practical work experience because I went to prison at such a young age, still in high school. But I did get a job at this one particular place in St. Louis that was a subsidiary of Peevely. It was an ice cream packing plant. And every time a felon gets to that part in the application where it say, have you ever been convicted of a felony? At that point, your heart starts beating fast, your hands start sweating, you don't know really what to say at that point. So I do what every other felon do, no. No, I ain't never been convicted of no felony. Because in your mind, you know that if you say yes, they're not going to hire you. They're not going to even give you a chance. So you lie and say no. Most of us lie on the application. So I put no on the application. I wound up getting hired. And I was there maybe 3 or 4 months. I went above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that what I was doing was proficient enough to keep me on, to hire me on permanently. My immediate supervisors, they loved what I was doing. They said that you're doing an excellent job, that your work ethic is superior. And one day I was doing, packing my ice cream, and one of the supervisors came and said they want to see you up in HR. So I'm thinking like they finna give me a raise. I'm already making $14 an hour. I'm thinking they finna give me a raise up to $16.85. I'm like, yes. I had just had my son. I'm like, man, I'm finna do it. I'm finna make some real good money here. It's back in the 90s, $16 an hour was some good money. It's some good money right now. And but they called me in HR, and the lady sent me down. She said, how you doing? I'm like, I'm fine, ma'am. And she said, I talked to the supervisors, and they say that you're an excellent employee. You're doing an excellent job. You go above and beyond the call of duty to make sure your work is done and completed in a timely manner. You're very helpful towards other employees. She said, however, we just did a background check on you and found out you've been to prison, and we're gonna have to let you go. And I looked at this lady, and my eyes watered. I'm thinking I'm here to get a raise, and she finna fire me. And I looked at her, I said, you finna fire me? You finna let me go? She said, I'm sorry, sir. That's our policy. Man, I was angry. Man, I was angry. And I said to the lady, which I shouldn't have said, but this is what I said to her. I say, you see, I came out here really trying to live according to society laws and to be upright and to be civilized and to do things right. But you ain't giving me a chance. You judged me by something I did when I was a juvenile. I say, see, I'll be the kind of young guy that will rob your ass when you get off work. I'll take everything you got. And when I said that, she started pushing buttons, getting on the cell phone, on the telephone, and security came, and security literally escorted me up out of this place. I was angry as hell because I wanted to do something right, and I couldn't. Now, at this point right here, I go home. I'm heated. Just had my son. My first son was just born, and I'm heated. I'm infuriated. And the only thing that went through my mind was to hell with the system. It's on. I'm getting that gun back in my hand. I'm taking everything I can get my hands on. We're gonna hustle. We're gonna deal with the drugs. I'm robbing people. I'm doing everything criminal I know how to do. I'm gonna do it like that now because the system won't let me win legitimately. And I go home with this thought in my mind. And my son was a baby boy. He was crying when I got home. And I picked my son up. And this was the bounce back for me. When I looked at my son, he looked up at me with them little pretty eyes. And I say, man, I can't go back like that now. I can't afford to do that, not just for me, but for him. It's somebody bigger than me I have to live for. I have to live for him now. It ain't all about me right now. It's about him now. And as I held my son, it was a newspaper on my table. And I looked at this newspaper, and it said a job, a wanted ad for a gang task force coordinator. And I looked down at that paper as I held my son. I'm looking at the description, and they were saying you had to have a bachelor's degree or equivalent experience and all that. And I didn't have none of that kind of stuff. But I said I knew how to work with young brothers, though, because I was a young brother in the streets and got locked up and dealt with the drugs and the guns and the gangs, and So I decided to put in my little application, and I go to this place right here. It was called St. Louis Caring Communities, and when I was there doing the interview, I was really intimidated. It was about 7 or 8 other applicants there, and they all had their portfolios and they had their nice resumes, and I was looking around and they had their little shirt and ties on, and I had a shirt that was too big for me that was hanging down that I had just got from a thrift store, but I wanted to look good and go on a nice interview, and my shirt didn't even fit my neck. It was hanging down with my little tie on, but these guys were looking immaculate. They had their little resumes. I'm like, man, I can't be up here. They ain't gonna hire me. Look at these guys. They got everything. I ain't got none of this. So by the time we get to the interview, it was 2 other guys before me and like 4 or 5 before me. When I get in the interview, the man get to talking. I say, look, man, I'm gonna tell you straight up. I've been to prison. I got 8 felonies, and I don't know if that's gonna hinder me, but I don't want to go through no more like lying, none of that. I've been to prison. I don't have no bachelor's degree, but I know how to work with these young guys. I went to prison when I was 16 years old. I know how to work with these young guys. I worked with them when I was in prison. That was me. And the guy looked at, he looked at my application. I didn't have a lot of work experience on that because I haven't had a job, and I sure wasn't going to put my previous job on there. They just escorted me out with security. I wasn't putting that on the resume. That wasn't going nowhere near the resume. Matter of fact, I didn't even work that. In my mind and in his mind, that was non-existent. So after about a week, they called me back. And everybody say, man, when they call you back for a second interview, that means they like you. That means they want you. And I go in there, with the same big shirt on. And the guy say, look, I think you'll be an excellent addition to our team. He said the other members of the task force, these guys been to college, they got degrees, but none of them been in the streets. None of them been to prison. None of them lived that kind of life that you've lived. And I think you'll be an excellent addition to this team right here. So I say, man, this is a beautiful thing. And this job's paying $16 an hour. So I wound up getting $16 an hour anyway. And then, so what happened was, in this company, they put me in the worst high school, one of the worst high schools in the city of St. Louis. Beaumont High School, at that time, is one of the worst high schools in the city of St. Louis. And after about 1 month, I had my own office. I had developed such a strong rapport with so many of these young brothers here because I didn't come at them like an authoritative figure. I didn't come at them like I was the police, like I was superior to them. I came at them like I was one of y'all. Like y'all my little homies, like these are my little brothers. And I would catch them shooting dice in the bathroom, I would just take their dice from them. I would catch them out there putting their little weed in the bathroom, I would take their weed and flush it down the toilet. I wouldn't call the police on them. Some of them even had weapons. I would take their weapon from them, wrap it up and say, not on my watch, not right now. You ain't gonna have that on the school ground. I'll give it to you after school, after you leave, but not right now. You cannot have that right now on school grounds. And I developed a strong rapport with these young guys. And it was this point in my life that really started the journey of my life into social service, into really serving the community. It was at this point where I started believing that even my story, what I have been through, can have its place somewhere. It may not reach everybody. It may not be for all platforms, but there's value somewhere. No matter what we experience, I really learned that the baggage that I had, somebody can take that baggage and put some of their belongings in it and carry their load a little bit easier, because I came with a whole lot of bags. And all the crap you got, we can just load it up in the bag. But it was at that point I really started believing that even my story had value. And that was a great bounce back for me.
Final thoughts by event producer Alexus Rhone. A former slave trader would have a religious conversion and write a poem that would eventually be set to music and sung around the world in congregations everywhere. One of the lines in that poem says, "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come, and grace will lead me home." Absolutely. And then a couple of hundred years after that, the descendant of a slave would write a poem that would reflect all of the ways in which African Americans have experienced such heartache and yet have been resilient. And I believe that part of the resilience is because of the poem that she penned, where she says, "When I am tempted to doubt myself and question my gifts and experiences, remind me, O God, of all that I know and of those things that I don't know that I know. Remind me of who I am and whose I am, even when I hide behind my piety to avoid doing what must be done and use you as an excuse for my indecision, for my lack of action, and for silencing my own self. Love me enough, O God, to lift the lid off my basket and order me to stop crouching in the dark like a woman without a God." Resilience and amazing grace, the hope chest for all of humanity. I am confident that with that, we're going to be all right eventually. Blessings to you. Thanks for watching.